All right, it's time for the week's coffee talk. Snowmageddon is coming. Well, it's not going to be Snowmageddon. They were originally predicting 5 to 48 inches of snow. They have now tamped it down to 8 to 10 inches starting Sunday. I can deal with 8 to 10 inches. Insert mom joke. But yeah, it's going to be a problem. I'm working in the snow. I am not looking forward to it. And following the snow is going to be bitter, bitter, bitter cold here in the mid-Atlantic, like a high of 11 degrees next week. So I went to Amazon and I ordered a navy blue mock turtleneck to wear under my uniform. I used to be a polar bear. I was short sleeves almost year round. And if I was wearing a jacket on or off duty, it meant that it was sub-zero temperatures. As I have gotten older, I have become such an old man when it comes to the cold. I would never be wearing a bulky sweatshirt like this in the house, but I have really become cold sensitive. So I ordered this mock turtleneck and it came. It was one of those Amazon marketplace, probably made in some sweatshop in China. And it was not exactly what was described. It is a navy blue mock turtleneck and it does fit, but it is like 1970s velour. It looks like something that the ladies' man would wear, if you recall that old skit, Tim Meadows skit from Saturday Night Live. It is pimp AF, and I am totally going to rock it under my uniform. So if you see me at one of the local hospitals, feel free to compliment my pimp velour navy blue mock turtleneck. What else do we have going on? ResusX, again, May 18th to 19th. Go to Instagram at Critical Care Now for information. Also go to www.resusx.com. I will be on the faculty again this year. Thank you, Haney, for the invite. Philadelphia, looking forward to it. Speaking of people at ResusX, I haven't talked to Melody whether she's coming or not. I think she is. She probably is. But check her out, Melody Bishop RT. She has been on fire with the social media content lately. You know she's on this kick that SIMV is a terrible vent mode. And it took me some explaining and some research and her explaining to me, because I'm a caveman, like 16 times, but it's not a good vent mode. And I have really come around and I understand why it's not a good vent mode, despite having taught in the past that it is a good vent mode. It's not. So check out her content. It is fire. You will learn a lot. And I like it because it's cerebral. We all put out a lot of mindless content like, oh, norepi is a good pressor because it squeezes the blood vessels. Albuterol does not cause pulmonary edema. It's just like this running a repeat cycle. But what she puts out, I feel like is new. Maybe not new for her or for a pulmonologist, but certainly, I don't know if I should say new, but information you don't hear every day in the EMS and emergency medicine sphere. And it makes you think. You watch a reel that she does and you have to look things up. At least I do. And I think that's how we learn best. Anyway, check her stuff out. Check out her stuff on SIMV. Chef's kiss. Okay, let's do a little bit of ranting. We're going to talk about some lights and sirens stuff because I have thoughts. And then I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Vanderbilt crash because the NTSB released their preliminary report and it reads like an action movie script and solidifies that I am never getting on a single pilot helicopter ever again in my life. But let's get to some stuff. My employer, again, disclaimer, I do not represent my employer on this podcast. It is totally separate. I am just Joe Shit, the night shift paramedic at my department. I am not in administration. I am not a supervisor. I am not a mid-level supervisor. It's just, I'm just a medic and I don't speak for the agency. I want to make that emphatically clear. Our agency put out a job posting earlier in the week. It was a good job posting, and go to www.medic94.org for information or go to their social media if you're interested in it. We already have some decent applications in, and it provided all the information on there, the schedule, the starting base pay, benefits, all that kind of stuff. I got some text messages, DMs, And I saw some comments on these social media, like EMS job postings stuff, that said, hey, how do you apply? And on the job posting, it very clearly says if you want to apply, send your resume to this email. I said to one person who messaged me and said, hey, I'm interested. How do I apply for this? I said, that is the first test, figuring out how to apply. And that involves reading the information on the job posting. And if it were up to me, if you have to ask, then no, thank you. We don't want you because you don't have any attention to detail. I do sometimes get asked, what is your biggest pet peeve? It is when people do not pay attention to little details. As Admiral William McRaven said, if you can't do the little things right, you'll never be able to do the big things right. It drives me insane. We have all worked with somebody like this. I worked with a guy on the flight team who was doing his Pennsylvania EMS recertification application online. Now, if you work in Pennsylvania, you know that the online portal has been the same for the last 20 years. If you pulled it up, it's like a relic from that should be in the Smithsonian in a technology exhibit. Like, wow, websites actually looked like that. It has been the same application for 20 years. And I'm working with him and he's like, hey, how do I do this? You click on the link and you fill in the areas. Well, what do I put here? It says, put your name. Okay, what do I do here? It says upload your CPR card. Well, where do I get that? And I finally told him, dude, you have been doing this job longer than me. You know how to do this. It tells you what to do. It's not that hard. Come on. Or the person who you work with who is like, when did we change the NARCS log? 3 months ago. Or you're in the supply cabinet restocking and they say, hey, where are the nebulizers? The same place they have always been. And for me, it is a big deal when somebody is not detail oriented. It is an annoyance, but when somebody can't focus on the little simple details, I have to ask, is that somebody that I want to trust to be able to push etomidate or ketamine in a human and then put a breathing tube in them? Is that somebody I want to look at a child that needs to be put on a ventilator and for them to measure them and calculate an ideal body weight and come up with vent settings when they can't find a nebulizer in the closet, the same closet they've been restocking from since they started at the department? And I have to say, no, I don't trust you if you are one of these people. So I know this isn't the majority of you, but I'm just ranting because it's come up this week. And the job application thing kind of made me get a little bit like apoplectic when I was getting these how do I apply messages. So just slow down, read, calibrate, and think, and then execute. And my rant on that is over. Let's talk about lights and sirens. I have seen some social media posts. This has been going on for years, this debate, but I have seen some things of late, and I know Wake County recently completely changed their, I think I'm saying this correctly, completely changed their response rubric or response protocols to mostly cold responses and certainly cold transports. And by cold, if anybody, because I'll get that message. What does cold response mean? It means a no lights and sirens response. And I see all of this stuff on social media. We should be responding cold. We should be responding cold. No lights and sirens. And I have to say, I agree. I do. We respond far too often with lights and sirens to bullshit. I do, though, think that the issue might be a little bit overstated and that maybe some places are swinging the pendulum a little too much. I don't think we should be responding lights and sirens to probably the majority of EMS calls that we respond to, especially the way EMS is utilized these days. I do, though, have to kind of cock my head and say, come on, you're just making a talking point when I see things. And these are quotes that I pulled off of the internet. I see that the running lights and sirens is a deadly epidemic. Like, come on. I see a public health dilemma. And then our best friend, Dr. Jeff Clawson, the founder of MPDS, wrote that the running lights and sirens is an issue And the quote from him was that it will cause, quote, killing nuns and children at a crosswalk going to a mouse bite. And that was quoted in the New York Times. Meanwhile, his program, MPDS, will send a fire engine, a paramedic unit, and an ambulance, code 3, to a mouse bite that has been triaged as difficulty breathing. Now, let me get a little aside here. This appropriate use of lights and sirens stuff is not just an EMS issue. It's an issue in all emergency services, but as far as we are concerned, it is just as much a 911 center call taking and dispatch issue as it is an EMS response issue. And I do think that we need some way to tease out which are going to be priority responses and which are not, which is the whole point of PMD and MPDS. My friend Ben, who has been doing this job for a lot longer than me, sorry, Ben, he said that when that system first came out, it was great because the intention was to tease out those priority calls. But as you know, the criticism that we have lodged again and again and again on this podcast is that it vastly over triages, and it's become this I allege, I think, my opinion is that it's become this like profitable Rube Goldberg system that kind of milks the jurisdictions that buy into it. That being said, the original intention was good. I think, and this is just my opinion, and remember, I have never been a 911 call taker or a dispatcher, but stop fucking asking the 911 caller if they or the patient is short of breath. From my experience in 24 years of doing this job, I can honestly, and I was thinking about this before I recorded, I was pacing around in my basement here, just getting the idea juices flowing before I recorded. I can't think of one time I have had to tease out of a patient that they were having true respiratory distress. They have offered it up at the point of patient contact. They will tell you if they are short of breath. A human being knows when another human being is short of breath. If Joe the plumber is getting ready for work and he finds his wife with difficulty breathing, he's going to call 911, and that's the first thing he's going to say. My wife is having difficulty breathing. And I have found in every system that I have worked, and in the system that I am currently in, that when I get in the truck and I see the first note says respiratory difficulty, respiratory distress, or whatever, it is usually accurate. So I don't think that they need to ask the patient or the caller if the person is having difficulty breathing, because I think if they really are, they will offer it up. I think that question is leading, and it leads to an insane amount of unnecessary ALS or even lights and sirens responses. You know it's going to be, I shouldn't say that. You know it's going to be much lower acuity when you see shortness of breath, respiratory difficulty as the last CAD note. And to me, that indicates that somebody called with a non-urgent problem, and the dispatcher or call taker then asked, is the patient or are you having any difficulty breathing? And the person was like, yeah, you know what? Yeah, I guess they are. And then it is upgraded to a lights and sirens or an ALS response. You'll get an injured person call, and I'll get in the medic unit and I'll look and I'll say 47-year-old male, slipped on the ice yesterday, left hip pain, short of breath. And it's like, I don't think they led with short of breath. I think you teased that out of them. And now this is no longer a BLS call. This is an ALS call. So now you're going to get 2 emergency vehicles responding code 3 to this patient. So enough about that. It does require smart call taking and smart dispatching. Let's look at some data. This comes from an EMS1. Actually, I pulled this from a variety of sources. The thing that springboarded it was an EMS1 article I read. Citations are in the show notes. So we have 6,500 emergency vehicle crashes every year in the United States, and 60% of them involve lights and sirens. Now, this is fire trucks, police cars, ambulances, the whole gambit. Of those accidents, when a fire truck or an ambulance is involved, they didn't separate them. I don't know why. Of those 6,500 emergency vehicle crashes, there are 32 deaths from ambulances and fire trucks. That is not necessarily a deadly epidemic of killing nuns and children at a crosswalk while going code 3 to a mouse bite. It is tragic. Those 32 deaths are certainly preventable. And I'm not poo-pooing it. I'm just saying that there were nationwide 32 deaths from ambulances and fire trucks. And we also need to talk to our fire department colleagues about the issue of dumping house and blowing through intersections with a whatever ton fire truck going for a fire alarm. I don't get it when they will dump like 12 pieces of apparatus. They are all blaring lights and sirens. And on the way there, the dispatcher will say, units responding to blah, blah, blah. Contractors on scene are reporting they set off the alarm. There is no fire. They're requesting the fire department cancel. And you hear in the background, while the engine and the horn is still blaring, we're going to continue in. I just don't get it. So I don't know how many of those 32 deaths came from ambulances. I'm sure somebody could dig it out. Okay. Does responding lights and sirens save time? A lot of people say no. I disagree. We have different points of data. And again, you can check my sources. Very often cited is that responding to a call with lights and sirens only saves 1.7 to 3.8 minutes for responding to the scene, and it only saves 0.7 to 3.8 minutes for transport. We're going to talk about transport in a minute. Transport is an issue, certainly, but saving 1.7 to 3.8 minutes for response, I don't know if I buy that. I don't know where that data set came from. I will tell you where I work that I think if you looked at my shift, night shift, you would find that that is accurate. I don't think that lights and sirens really save much time in the middle of the night in the area where I work. And I'll incriminate myself here, and I will say that I don't put the lights on half the time, probably more than half the time, when I'm responding to a call on night shift, just because there's nobody on the road and the population in the area is like tucked into their beds at night. So it really doesn't save any time. The lights don't make the vehicle drive any faster. Day shift is a different freaking story in my area. What could be a 12-minute response to a call without the lights and sirens and going through intersections carefully and safely, I mean, that could add 10, 15, maybe even 20 minutes. So when I see that only saves 1.7 to 3.8 minutes, I have to ask where and when, and is that generalizable to the overall population that EMS responds to? I don't know. Another study showed a 30.9% improved response time, which I think is probably a little more accurate just from my anecdotal experience. Also, on response times, I think that judging an EMS system by response times is bullshit. I think it's stupid for politicians to harp on that, to look at what could be a phenomenal EMS system with ultrasound, pre-hospital blood. We'll even throw in end-tidal CO2, all the toys, great protocols, great medical direction, great staff. And the county council or city council or whatever governing body judges them by response times. Well, you were under that 8-minute, 59-second response metric, blah, blah, blah percent of the time. I think that is stupid. That being said, response times are important. One, because we do respond to some, granted, it is the minority, but we do respond to time-sensitive, life-threatening emergencies. And also, not for nothing, the public has an expectation that when they call 911 for emergency medical services, that we are going to respond quickly. And if you call 911 for your dad, who is sitting at the kitchen table clutching his chest while he is pale, clammy, and diaphoretic, and it takes EMS 25 minutes to get there, and they are 3.4 miles down the road, which is a valid response time going non-lights and sirens in the Philadelphia suburban area, you're going to be going, where the hell is the ambulance? The public perception is there. So I don't think that we can just jump on the bandwagon of saying, yeah, we shouldn't be responding lights and sirens. I think we need to be smart about it. I do. We do need to reduce use of lights and sirens responding to calls. There is no doubt about that. You will get no argument from me. but we need to be intelligent about it. Just a couple other things I have written down. I probably should have thrown this in earlier. I have seen 2 points of data. I saw one source that said that you're 50% more likely to get into an accident when driving with the lights and sirens. But another study of 19 million responses showed the accident rate was 17.4% higher when responding with lights. And the risk of an accident while responding to a call with lights is 5.4 per 100,000 responses. So I asked Google Gemini, I said 5.4 per 100,000 cases risk. What is that equivalent to? That is an equivalent risk to dying from an anesthesia complication when undergoing an elective procedure. Just a little interesting tidbit. Let's talk about transport. Transport is an issue, and the data I would argue that the data is indisputable, that you are way more prone to getting into an accident during transport with lights and sirens, much more so than you are responding to a 911 call. And I think because if you're transporting with lights and sirens, you know the patient is sick and you're probably a little bit hopped up and you're like, let's just get to the hospital, get to the hospital. We had a cardiac arrest recently and my partner transported the patient. So I was doing what I usually do when I clear a serious call. I'm pulling into Wawa and here I come see the ambulance just boom, blowing past me. And I thought, oh my God, it's the patient's stable. Like, yeah, they're critically ill, but what are you doing? And it dawned on me when I saw that that's me many times. I'm guilty of this many times. And I have to say that, yeah, I can probably justify transporting patients, lights and sirens, but I will be totally honest with you that I think maybe I need to be better about not using them in transport, even on critical patients, because I'm using the protocols and I'm treating the patient and I'm making them more stable. Like, yeah, the Crike case, all day long. Drive it Mach 5 to the hospital, lights and sirens, get me there by the seat of my pants. I don't care. But that's like a twice in a career call. We do need to reduce transporting with lights and sirens because we're treating the patient. We're making them more stable. So let's look at why I think transport is a bigger issue. I told you that in that study of 19 million responses, with the accident rate being 17.4% higher when responding with lights, when transporting with lights, the accident rate is 144.29% higher when transporting with lights and sirens. I guess to wrap up what I'm saying is that we need to be smart about how we use lights and sirens. And I know people have already said this before, but I'm not jumping on the bandwagon of saying no lights and sirens ever. We should only be doing it on a very small minority of calls. I'm not saying that. I do think that we need to get to the scene quickly and efficiently and of course safely. But I think we need to be smart about it. I will agree with this Jeff Clausen quote that I wrote down here. I will say the use of warning lights and sirens during an emergency response to the scene and during patient transport should be based on standardized protocols that take into account situational and patient problem assessments. I completely agree with that. I think that is spot on. So a lot of rambling, but let me say, let's just be safe out there. Let's get some rational protocols. Let's get some rational dispatch protocols that work, and don't just say, oh, we're going to get fired if we don't triage that toe pain as difficulty breathing. Like, shut up. Like, let's just be smart. I do like that you see administrators and medical directors and leaders in the industry using data to show that maybe lights and sirens responses to the majority of calls that we go to is not appropriate and does present a risk. I like that they are using data. If we are going to use data and risk and evidence basis to make operational changes, can we do this with things like C-collars? Can we do this with things like the bullshit refusal protocols that we have to follow? Like, oh, to avoid liability, you have to tell the parents of that 4-year-old who has an ear infection who say that they're going to take them to a pediatrician 2 hours later. You have to tell them that, well, that child could have an unforeseen serious illness and yeah, they could die if they don't go to the ER for an evaluation. Can we consider things like that and make rational changes based on data, based on good practice, and based on reasonable risk assessments and risk mitigation? And finally, to the medical directors out there and to the systems that want to reduce the use of lights and sirens during transport, which again, I think we should. My argument is that if you're going to do that, then you need to equip your crews to be able to adequately take care of the patient during that transport to the hospital. Good protocols, good scope of practice, and trust in your providers to carry them out with not having to call and mother may I for absolutely everything. And finally, to wrap up this lights and sirens thing, I do think it's funny. I sound like my wife arguing with me by starting out with, I just think it's funny that. I do think it's funny that I see these medical directors and I see influencers and I see educators go out there and talk about how it is too risky to respond lights and sirens to that chest pain call. And it's just not needed most of the time. And these are the same people who will put on a flight suit and go into their flight job. Or these are the same EMS medical directors who also work as ER physicians and will pick up the phone and say, ground transport for that PE is going to be 5 hours. Spin up a helicopter and we will continue to fly without batting an eye and put up more and more and more helicopters and utilize them, knowing that flying patients in a rotor wing aircraft is absolutely plagued with risk and idiotic overuse, in my opinion. What a great way to dovetail to talking about the Vanderbilt crash. I don't know what they were flying. Actually, I think they got canceled on something. I don't know what they were going to. I do know, though, speaking about the HEMS overusage real quick before I get into this, I'm not going to say which program or which fatal crash it was, because I heard from somebody who knows somebody who was at the scene of a scene response where the helicopter crashed and everybody died. So that's not gold standard me looking at body cam footage or hearing radio transmissions or knowing definitively, but I consider this to be a reliable source that helicopter got spun up for a, quote, complex finger laceration. And that's what led to the crew crashing and dying. I shouldn't say that's what caused them crashing and dying. That is as stupid a statement as saying going lights and sirens is going to kill nuns and children at a crosswalk. But let's just say if you consider the Swiss cheese diagram, the chain of events that lead to an incident and the butterfly effect, a friggin' finger laceration led to 3 people dying in a helicopter crash. Wild if you think about it. All right, let's talk about the Vanderbilt crash. The lesson learned, here's my bullet point in bold that I have written down. Plain and simple, aviation vendors and programs need to suck it up and give some training to med crews for how to handle a single pilot incapacitation, because you are F-U-C-K-E-D fucked if the pilot goes unresponsive. Do I think we need to send med crews through helicopter school? Absolutely not, because that is just, I think it's a cost that most places reasonably cannot pay for. I do think, though, you can put them in a simulator and run them through, here's how to get the helicopter on the ground without it being a ball of fire. I do think you can do that. And some programs do that. And I have heard other programs have brought it up, and the aviation vendors and the operational managers of the program have just straight up been like, no. So let's read some stuff. I'm going to read right from excerpts from the NTSB preliminary report. So the Vanderbilt crash. During a post-accident interview, the flight paramedic recalled that after receiving the cancellation from AirCom, the pilot turned the helicopter around. The flight paramedic acknowledged the cancellation by radio and advised we're returning to base. Blah, blah, blah. After that point, he noticed that the pilot didn't make any noticeable movements, which was unusual because typically the pilots would acknowledge. After he did not get confirmation from the pilot that they were turning around, the flight paramedic leaned forward and tapped the pilot on the shoulder. The pilot then looked at him, and the flight paramedic said, "Did you hear that? We are returning to base." We are RTB. I think RTB is stupid. I hate it when people say RTB. Just say returning to base. Like, copy that, Roger, Roger, RTB. But another pet peeve. So the paramedic received no response from the pilot. He then asked the pilot if he was okay and saw that the pilot's expression was a complete blank stare. Oh shit. I mean, that is the true oh shit moment. I had a pilot who was young and healthy get one of those hit like that with the GI bug while we were flying, and we returned to base. And I remember thinking, oh my God, please get this helicopter on the ground. Actually, it's one of those things that kind of led me to think about getting out of flight. It was several months ago, and I just remember thinking like, oh my God, thank God we are on the ground. I can't imagine, especially with some of these, old men and old men who smoke a lot. That makes up a lot of the pilot population. I can't imagine being in a situation like that. That is just god awful. And this flight paramedic, if what is in this report is accurate, and I have every reason in the world to think that it is, this flight paramedic deserves the Presidential Medal of Freedom. So the flight paramedic had never touched a cyclic control stick in flight before, as they were not allowed to. But from watching pilots' hands in flight, he knew that small inputs would result in small reactions, and he needed a large reaction. He then grabbed the cyclic on top of the pilot's hand and pulled it back. The pilot did not resist. The helicopter responded much more than he was expecting, and after which he made smaller inputs to slow down. He knew from watching pilots land that he had to decrease the power, so he also reached across the pilot's lap and tapped down on the collective control because he knew that would slow them down. At this time, the flight paramedic was out of his seat, kneeling over the console to reach the flight controls. The only coherent reaction he got from the pilot was when he acknowledged where the flight paramedic was pointing and said to him, "There, no there," and pointed to a field further away and one that was much more wide open. The flight paramedic then looked up and saw a bright yellow field lined with trees with descending terrain. While the flight paramedic was leaning over the console trying to control the helicopter, it struck the tops of the trees while approaching the field, and from about 10 to 20 feet above the ground, the flight paramedic made a hard flare and the helicopter impacted the ground. And tragically, as you know, the flight nurse was killed. But holy shit. I can tell you that I would have no idea what to do. I would try to do something, but then the helicopter would probably be upside down and we would be a fireball in a gazillion bits. That flight paramedic is a friggin' rock star, in my opinion. I don't know who you are, but on behalf of the podcast, kudos to you. You deserve a medal. And while very tragically the flight nurse died, and I've read about the flight nurse, seems like he was a phenomenal guy and a great professional. And I'm not just saying that because he died in a helicopter crash. Like I do read about these people when they die, and I read about this guy and I was like, wow, this guy lived and breathed the job. Like, seemed like a real rock star. As tragic as it was that he died, I mean, from my experience flying for 11, almost 12 years, if the flight paramedic didn't do this and didn't do it as well as he did, all three of them would have died, and maybe more people on the ground. So kudos to you. This solidifies that I'm really glad that I have gotten out of the flight world. And with that, people, that's the coffee talk. Be careful in the snow if it's going to, I think it's going to snow in most of the country, actually. Texas is getting snow. Missouri's getting snow. The South is getting snow. We're getting snow. 8 to 10 inches. I'm ready for spring. That's the coffee talk, people. Take care. Be safe out there. And use caution and your brain when responding and transporting. Love you all. Take care.